Wyoming, 1974, October. The forest is cold and silent the way only wilderness gets. No traffic, no voices, just the sound of your own breath. A man named Kyle Higdon raises his rifle, takes aim at an elk and fires. And the bullet stops. Not deflects, not misses, it stops, suspended in the air about 50 feet ahead of him, and then drops straight to the ground like gravity remembered it, but a bit too late. Now, researchers have spent decades debating what happened to Carl Higdon after that moment. But we're not here for that conversation. We're here for the bullet. Because that bullet, hanging in the air, refusing to complete what it started, exposes an assumption so deep most people never think to question it. We believe that when something begins, it must finish. You fire, the bullet travels. You start, the result unfolds. That belief is not a fact. It's a frame. And once you see it as a frame, the way you understand your own life, your progress, your failures, your effort, it changes completely.
What holds that belief in place isn't evidence, it's expectation. The mind closes gaps automatically. It doesn't wait for reality to confirm, it races ahead and fills in the ending before the ending arrives. Psychologists call this cognitive closure. We are neurologically wired to complete patterns because incomplete things create genuine discomfort. So the mind resolves that discomfort the fastest way it can, by deciding the outcome is already on its way. But here's what that means in practice. Every time something stalls, a plan, a relationship, a version of yourself that you've been working toward, your mind doesn't ask whether completion was ever guaranteed. It assumes it was. And then it looks for who or what to blame for the interruption. The interruption isn't the problem. The assumption underneath it is.
That breaks something important. The link between initiation and inevitability. Most people treat beginnings like contracts. Once something starts, the ending feels already secured, already owned. But if an event can exist without completing, and Carl Higdon's bullet proves that it can, then beginnings aren't promises, they're conditional states. Nothing is locked in until something locks it in. What looks like forward motion can dissolve, not because something went wrong, but because it was never anchored. Think about the thing you've returned to more than once. The project, the habit, the plan you've restarted so many times you've stopped telling people about it. You've been treating each restart as a new beginning. But a new beginning doesn't change what was missing the first time. Starting again isn't the same as stabilizing what was never stable. The assumption that completion follows initiation doesn't hold. It never did. We just never had reason to question it until a bullet stopped in midair and refused to become real.
So the real problem changes. It's no longer why something didn't finish. It's why we were so certain it would. And this is where the damage actually lives. Not in the incomplete event, but in the diagnosis that follows. You've done this. Something stalls and immediately you ask, what's wrong with me? Was I not consistent enough? Not disciplined enough? Did I not want it badly enough? And those questions feel honest. They feel like accountability. But they're built on the assumption that completion was guaranteed and you somehow broke the chain. The structure doesn't support that. Nothing was required to complete. The event began, but it was never selected into a finished state. Interruption isn't deviation from the process. For something that was never stabilized, it's only the outcome that the structure allowed.
Carl Higdon fires. The bullet suspends. The event never reaches a state that can be counted as real. That moment defines completion with unusual precision. It's not the end of movement, it is the point where an event stabilizes into coherence. Everything before that point is provisional, including what looks and feels like progress. Because motion inside an unstable frame produces the same sensation as moving towards a fixed outcome. It feels like something is happening, but the structure hasn't changed. The event is still unresolved. And this is exactly why someone can spend years on something, genuinely working, genuinely committed, and ends up in the same place they started. And this isn't because they lacked effort, because effort cannot produce completion. Only selection can. And they were pushing on the wrong lever the entire time.
When completion fails, something else becomes possible. And this is the part almost everyone misses. The event no longer holds the field in a closed way. The boundaries that usually keep everything contained break open, and in that gap, something appears that the original sequence would have permanently excluded, not added, not introduced from outside, just no longer blocked. Carl Higdon's bullet froze, and the impossible entered the frame, not despite the incompletion, but through it. That is not a consolation, that is the mechanism. Which means your frozen bullets, the plans that stalled, the sequences that broke, the things you quietly stopped mentioning, they're not just failures, they are open fields. Moments where what the momentum of ordinary life normally keeps invisible has room to register. The question is whether you're paying attention when that opening appears, or whether you're already back to forcing the original sequence into motion, which is the one guaranteed way to miss it entirely.
The mistake is treating interruption as something to fix. More effort, more discipline, more insistence on continuity. But continuation cannot produce completion if completion was never selected. And all it does is extend an unstable state and make the instability feel like your fault. This is the quietest and most expensive trap in most people's lives. The structure has not changed. The event is still unresolved. And no amount of pushing resolves that, because pushing is not the same as selecting. So the question has to change. Not how do I keep this moving, but what am I actually allowing to finish? Not why isn't this working, but what is remaining unselected here and why? Those aren't motivational reframes, they're structural ones. They make visible things that were hidden before, and they stop costing you years.
That shift changes what you pay attention to entirely. Instead of generating motion, attention moves to what is being permitted to complete. And once you look through that lens, certain things become impossible to unsee. The project held at 80% because finishing means being judged, and not finishing means you can still say it wasn't your best effort. The relationship cycling back to the same argument year after year because resolution would require one person to actually change rather than just apologize. The plan that stays almost viable indefinitely because full commitment would close off the other options that you're not ready to let go of. These aren't failures of efforts, they're choices, unacknowledged, but choices. And once that's clear, the exhaustion of continuous motion without completion starts to make a different kind of sense.
Control changes meaning here. It's no longer about managing each step of a sequence. It becomes about determining which events stabilize into outcomes. That is a quieter kind of power that most people are trained to want. We are taught that effort is the variable, that more action produces more result, that persistence is the thing that separates outcomes. But effort without selection is just motion. It cannot close what was never selected into coherence. The real leverage point has never been continuation. It has always been the moment of choosing what actually gets to become real. Once that is understood, genuinely understood, not just heard, effort becomes precise rather than constant. You stop managing every stage. You start determining what finishes.
Carl Higdon fired his rifle in a Wyoming forest in 1974, and the bullet never arrived. For 50 years, that moment has been filed under the unexplained. But what it shows, if you look at it structurally rather than dramatically, is something precise and uncomfortable. Completion is not guaranteed. It is not produced by initiation. It is not sustained by effort alone. It occurs only where something is genuinely, deliberately selected into coherence. And when that selection doesn't happen, when the bullet stops and the event stays open, what was blocked by normal continuity gets a chance to enter. Not every sequence deserves completion, and not every beginning was pointing at the right ending. Some bullets are supposed to drop. The ones that don't complete aren't always malfunctions. Sometimes the structure is telling you plainly what's needed here isn't more continuation, it's a different kind of choice. Completion is not automatic. It never was. It is chosen.
If something in this has shifted the way you see your own patterns, the ones that keep starting but never quite arrive, then don't let it pass unnoticed. Stay with that. These aren't ideas you understand once and move on from. They change as you revisit them. So if you want more conversations like this, take a moment to support the work. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who's been pushing something that won't complete, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. So until next time, think differently, dream boldly, and create consciously.